at the end of the day, when there's not a lot of resources out here and your teachers aren't stressing you to come to class or not even caring, you know, you're not going to go to school. You're going to sell drugs. You're going to do what you have to do.
To go down to a drug corner in the inner city is the rational act of somebody going to work for the only company that exists in a company town.
You won't hear about the war on drugs in tonight's presidential debate, but you should. It's a huge part of modern American life, and frankly, the war on drugs has been an incredible success. Sure, drugs are easily available at a low price, and we've incarcerated millions of nonviolent drug addicts and very few kingpins while not stopping the flow of drugs into this country one tiny bit. But for people involved directly or tangentially with the prison industrial complex, for police departments, for judges, lawyers, and elected officials who have used the war on drugs to make money and or get elected, the war's been a huge success.
The problem is that cop that made that cheap drug arrest, he's going to get paid. He's going to get the hours of overtime for taking the drugs down to ECU. He's going to get paid for processing the prisoner down at Central Booking. He's going to get paid for sitting back at his desk and writing the paperwork for a couple hours. And he's going to do that 40, 50, 60 times a month so that his base pay might end up being only half of what he's actually paid as a police officer.
With us now, filmmaker Eugene Jarecki, the director and writer of The House I Live In, which we've been seeing, which was a grand jury prize winning doc at this year's Sundance Film Festival. The documentary opens Friday, October 5th. I have seen it. It is awesome. I highly recommend it. Congratulations to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here.
Sure. So, I mean, as you point out of the film, we're looking at it wrong if we say that there are no winners in the war on drugs. There are winners in the war on drugs. Just lay out who are some of the winners and who are some of the losers as you see it.
Well, you know, my real feeling is that everybody loses, because as I traveled across this country to about 25 states, sure, there are winners in the sense that there are a lot of people who make their living from our system of mass incarceration. But those are people who can barely describe their jobs, what they do each day, to their children. Right. So they lose on a moral level. They lose spiritually because we've devoted ourselves as a country to looking at drug addiction, which afflicts so many Americans, as addictions do across the board. We've dealt with drug addiction for some reason as something that we should punish rather than approach with compassion. And so all of these people who work in prison industrial jobs, whether it's jailers who I talk to, cops who I talk to, judges, prosecutors, everybody up and down the chain, what I found most of all actually is they all deeply regret the way things have gone. Right. And they all wish it were different. They wish those of us on the outside would make it different so that they could, for example, come home and feel proud about what they do. So the victims aren't just those who get the drug laws applied to them and they end up incarcerated for incredible periods of time and their families get destroyed and their communities shattered. It's everybody involved as a victim of a system they didn't create.
We go back to the beginning of the war on drugs, right, which Richard Nixon declared. He wanted to criminalize, but he also wanted to treat a lot of addicts. And we've gone away from the treatment model altogether. Why did we lose sight of that being part of the whole model?
Well, it's easy politics to say you're tough on crime. And Nixon discovered that in '68 when he made, for the first time, crime a national issue. The funny thing is about Nixon is he deserves a great deal of credit actually on the ground for how he dealt with addiction. Because he dealt with the drug problem in a way where, two-thirds of his drug budget were spent on treatment. Only a third on interdiction and law enforcement. Right. So he knew personally and practically from experience that treatment was the way to go. And yet he also knew that on the campaign trail, that doesn't sell. That on the campaign trail, you want to say, I'm going to be tough on crime. I'll protect you from the evildoers down the block. I will protect you from this scourge in American life. That got him elected in a landslide in '72, and now politicians have followed suit ever since, whether it's Reagan, Clinton. Both parties agree on one thing. Yeah. Saying you're not tough on crime has been political suicide. I believe it's changing, but it has been, till now, political suicide.
Well, you were just telling us as you sat down that you just got back from an incredible trip to Oklahoma. Tell us what you were doing there.
I met some incredible people in Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a state with one of the toughest prison systems in the country, and yet those who run the Department of Corrections in Oklahoma have been some of my greatest educators about the way this system works. They are deep-thinking, caring people whose basic message is, here inside the prison system, what we see is the receiving end of what cheap politicians do by saying they're tough on crime. They promise taller fences, more cops on the beat, more handcuffs, etc., and the public gets all lathered up, and so when they get elected, they have to deliver on that. Well, where do they get the money? They take the money directly out of the programs that people in corrections have in place to try to give people the skill they never learned. So when they get out, they don't become a repeat offender. They have a skill that might get them a job or teach them character traits that our failing schools don't teach them. And so I learned from people on the inside that corrections sees the failure of this system on the receiving end. So when we went to go show the film now in prisons in Oklahoma, we did that because Oklahoma is a remarkable state that allowed us to show a quite controversial film to the prisoners inside Oklahoma. And what I learned was that the prisoners are themselves, like the guards around them, all trapped in a system they wish were different. I had big burly men with tattoos stand up and just say to me, I needed help. I needed help, Eugene, like someone in your family probably needs help. And I didn't get help. I got punishment. And that led to more addiction. And then I got punished further. And now I'm here, as one of them told me, I'm in jail for life without parole for the possession of 3 ounces of methamphetamine. That's a package about that big, and he will never leave prison.
Eugene, so what's the solution? What's the, what do we do? Is the argument that we legalize drugs, just some drugs, all drugs? What do we do about this?
Well, I think legalize is a dangerous word because it's been used over time to scare people, to think that the only antidote to having a system that's draconian and the laughingstock of the world. We incarcerate more people in this country than any other country in the world, and we are supposed to be the beacon of democracy for the world. So the antidote to that has always been, let's scare people by saying legalization, which means like a frontier mentality where it's a free-for-all. Every stoner is on every block. That's not the smart approach. The smart approach is careful and thoughtful decriminalization. Sounds like a euphemism, but it's been done in Portugal, and what it means is you treat drugs effectively like we treat alcohol. It's a controlled substance. The government profits from it. What an idea. And then in addition to that, they control the way we use it. So grown-ups can take alcohol, right? They can do it responsibly. Children can't. And if you're a grown-up and you use alcohol irresponsibly, if it becomes a factor, for example, in another crime, like you drive your car and hurt somebody, that's manslaughter, right? If you were using alcohol, it's going to be called murder. So we have this treatment of a controlled substance like alcohol as something that has to be responsibly consumed, and there are specific regulations about it. And of course, if another terrible thing happens that we all fear, rape, robbery, murder, whatever, it's an aggravating factor. I would say the same should be true of drugs.
But so can heroin be responsibly consumed, for example?
I think heroin can be responsibly handled by a government that treats its people with compassion when they're addicted to it, as many countries have proven, and we are falling way behind that.
Eugene Jarecki, the film is called The House I Live In. Thank you much for being here. And thank you for pointing out that we've been criminalizing black and brown people, but now that the meth trend is coming, and you talk about that a lot in the film, that when a lot of white people are going to prison for these drug laws, then we're going to see a change. Good luck with the film.
Thank you. It comes out this Friday in New York, October 5th, so I'd love people to come and see it.
I'm sure they will. Eugene Jarecki, thank you. And up next, Mortal Kombat political style.